We're really blessed today to have a guest speaker from Philadelphia, Bowman, who's with us. And we're going to take a moment because one of the results of my near-death experience was that I came back with the ability to improvise. People said, oh, I had to do something in each meeting. So we're going to take a few minutes before we get started with the body of the meeting to just kind of clear ourselves, center ourselves. If you will sit up and close your eyes and kind of relax. And just go wherever you go when you go. To have a few announcements to make. One is that Linda Jacqueline, who is a board member of the National IANDS group and lives in St. Louis, is making a cookbook for near-death experiences.
The kill?
Yeah, that's what she wants. Kill recipes. How to get there in one easy lesson, or whatever works. She's just sent me an email saying that it will also include helpful hints for navigating in this world until we reach the next. So if you have any of those, they can be cooking, household, about plans, legal, accounting, relationships, flowers, medical travel, a fun book to generate funds, as she put it. She also needs one-liners for headers and footers. Like, for example, I came back from my brother who needed me, or whatever. Her email address is on today's announcement sheet. If you didn't get one, please pick one up at the front table on your way out, and email Linda with your favorite recipes with appropriate names if you can add those. I can't see with my glasses on. I think in the fall of 2003, Pam Kircher, who was our speaker in May, Dr. Pam Kircher, who's a hospice doctor, is also on the board of the National IANDS, and she will be here helping us look at various sites. If you have anything to recommend, please let me know, but not during the meeting, because I get a little spacey during these meetings, and I don't hold information very well. So please email me or call me during the week or the month or whatever, and let me know if you have any other suggestions for that. I ask that you please take a few of our regular flyers, the yellow ones up there on the table, and put them in conspicuous places, if you would be so kind. Most of the things about our meeting get spread word of mouth, so that would be wonderful. We also need some help with publicity. It's Lerna's volunteered. Ruth Scobie did some really great work for me this month. She called Evanston Review and got it in there, and also went and put posters around it down Summer Street in Evanston. And we need a few more people to do that to really get the message out. Especially, we're having Melvin Morse next month, who has written so many books about near-death experiences. He's a pediatrician from Seattle who, although he's not had a near-death experience, he started noticing that so many of his little patients would say things like, "Oh, gee, heaven is fun," and I talked to Jesus last night, and none of them wanted to come back. And he was trying to figure this out, and he thought that they were reacting to medication that they had. So he decided to do in-depth research, which is what he did, and the results came back that those who had had the medication didn't remember anything, but the ones who had no medication were the ones who remembered the experiences. So since then, I've noticed that actually that sometimes people will have died and don't remember anything, but their lives will change. So that's another cue that perhaps they had a near-death experience, although they might not remember it. The next conference, the date has been announced. It's in Hawaii, thank you God, and it will be January 8th to 10th in the year 2003. I think that there will be some really inexpensive packages made for this conference, the Hawaii IANDS group is very active and has a lot of money, and they're working very hard to try to make it inexpensive for us to come. So you might want to go on the website and keep track of that. So when the actual amounts and so on and so forth come out and what they have arranged, you can take advantage of it. You can go to our website, www.chicagoians.org, and access information directly from the homepage there. So, we still need volunteers for the telephones. I hate to have to ask people to call 2 pages, but if somebody's sick, even if you're willing to be a backup for an occasional page of names to call, that would be wonderful. So let me know if you're able to do that. At this point, we usually go around and introduce ourselves and tell a little bit about why we're here and if you've had an experience, if you want to share that. Actually, I experimented in December with not doing that because it seems like everybody has an opinion about how to do this. and there's a real need for people who have recently had an experience to make contact and hear from other people. And if we eliminate this altogether, this is no longer a possibility. So today, I think what we'll do is try to go, but do it, not on the long side, on the short side. Last month we had an absolutely incredible sharing because we didn't have a guest speaker. We were able to really take the time. We had a lot of people here who were able to hear people's thoughts around them, and the discussion was very, very intense. So it's nice to do those, but there are other times that we have to do other wonderful things like have Bowman talk to us. So in any case, we'll kind of go around on the faster side today. It would be nice if you have something to share and you're willing to share it. You could just briefly say, I've had a near-death experience as a result of, or I've had this or that or the other experience. And then when we take our break, before Carol starts speaking, you can make contact with a person during the break. So this has always been a very, very special group. It's been a very special meeting. And I feel really blessed to be able to facilitate it. There's been so many contacts made over the years, since May '98 when we started. I think that that's a real gift. And the day when we now have over 23 million Americans who've had a near-death experience, that's estimated to be over 10% of the population. The message is absolutely astounding. And I think we need to get it out to as many people as we can, as quickly as we can, because I think the rest of the people need to know this. So, I'm Diane, and I had a near-death experience in 1995, and I'm going to pass the mic to Bryce. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, great. See how quickly that time goes? Look, it's been a half an hour, and I said we're only going to do 25 minutes. It's actually a little more. And it just seems like 2 or 3 minutes. That's right. There's so many people to talk to and so much to say. It just... We should just have a party sometime, you know? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. A near-death party. Yeah. I know, Seattle, they have what they call near-death night out. And they pick certain movies. And they go to movies as a group. Movies that are spiritually oriented or relate to near-death experiences. Have you seen Dragonfly? That's what he just was telling me. Should we do a near-death night out and go see Dragonfly? How many in favor? How many people go? Okay, which should we do it? Going here. Carol, how did I meet you?
It's in Philadelphia.
I met Carol because I was watching a special called Beyond Death. And it had a little segment of her work, with her on it, and her work. And she just started talking, and I went, oh, I gotta know this woman. And I felt like I didn't know her. And we discovered a few interesting connections. But, since you've been here. But interestingly enough, that was in, I think, June, approximately June of 2000 or 2001? 2000, June 2000, that I saw that special. And then I went to the National IANDS Convention in Philadelphia a month later. And lo and behold, who was one of the speakers? But Bowman. And so immediately I went up to her after and said, I know you, and we really have to get you to Chicago. And she kind of looked at me like I was nuts, but then we went out to lunch with Kim Sharp, and the rest is history. So we finally got her here. Carol has a master's in psychology, or in counseling, a master's in counseling. She didn't intend to do past life work, as I understand it, but it kind of came to her with her children. So she will tell you all about this. She is now doing something that I didn't really realize. She does intensive past life regressions. It would have been nice if she could have stayed long enough to do some of us. Maybe we could get her back sometime.
Yes.
She does 3-hour sessions, and she won't do it in any less time than 3 hours. And I know that she does a wonderful job on those. So I think it would be something that all of us would enjoy experiencing. But anyway, we're awfully glad she's here. Let's give her a warm welcome. Carol.
Can you do the mic? Yeah, I can do the mic. Can I? Is that all right, Joe?
Because otherwise we can't hear you.
So I have to do a little dancing up here too, right? I have the handheld mic. Yes, well, I finally made it. I was supposed to have come originally last October. I think it was the weekend of my birthday, October 14th, and I got a very severe sinus infection that week. And we were also on high alert after 9/11. And I realized there was no way I was going to get out of bed and get on a plane with that sinus infection, and I must admit I was a little terrified of flying at the time too. So those two factors contributed to my not coming at that time. However, I understand there was a fabulous program because I got a tape from Diane and Mary Fleming, who was in my first book, whose children, I think, 3 out of 4 had past life memories, or 4 out of 4? 4 out of 4. 4 out of 4. And Colleen Hawken, who was also in the first book, who was on Oprah with me, as well as Mary. And Billy Luke was here, too, to tell his own story. And they were all fabulous, and they did a fantastic job. And so I was very grateful that it worked out so well. And here I am. And I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank Diane for persisting and getting me out here. Perseverance furthers, as they say. And we did discover, as Diane is very intuitive, as you probably all know. Probably most of you here who've had any kind of near-death or out-of-body experiences are also very intuitive. But Diane and I have discovered a lot of very strange synchronistic connections that we have in this lifetime. So it makes it all very interesting, and I'm happy to be here. And this is my 3rd or 4th trip to Chicago, and I feel that it's a very high level of psychic activity here. And it's funny because in my lectures when I go around the country speaking about children's past life memories, I always say, yes, and here's another case from Chicago, because most of my best cases come from this area. If anyone can explain that to me, I'd love to hear why you think that might be. And I'll tell you a couple of the stories today. And I guess what I'm going to do is just speak for a little while. I don't know how many of you have read my books. I expect how many people have read my books? Some. Okay, not all. So this won't be totally redundant. I do want to speak for a while and tell you about my research, and then leave time for questions, because I find that the most interesting part of the day for me anyway, because I get some new insights from that, and I hope that if you have some cases you will share them, because that's always most revealing when you have someone talking about their own experiences. And I am talking about children's spontaneous past life memories today, which to you who are interested in near-death experiences is the continuation of the journey. For those of you who came back, The other option was not returning into the same physical body. And if you don't, then you continue the journey, and eventually you might find yourself in the body of a child saying, how did I get here? Wait a minute. You know, I miss my family. Or, as a lot of children say, you know, I remember when I was big. And that's precisely what I want to talk about today. Children who have spontaneous past life memories. This has nothing to do with hypnosis. This has nothing to do with prompting from adults. This is about a natural phenomenon in young children. When young children are 2, 3, and 4 years of age, sometimes as soon as they start talking, they will recall their other lifetimes on Earth, being in a physical body. And some children remember a lot of detail about their previous lives. And let me give you an example. I'd like to start with a few stories, so in case you don't know what I'm talking about, this will give you an idea. This story is not in either of my books, but I always love it. Every time I tell it in my lectures, I'm intrigued by it. I got an email. After my first book came out in '97, everybody started getting online, which was perfect for me, because people could correspond with me anonymously and share their stories. And to me, the internet has changed the course of reincarnation research. Because prior to that, where would anyone go with one of these stories? So I got an email from a woman in Wilmington who told me this story. She said that she has 3 children, and when her son was about 2 years old, they were moving, and she was unpacking a box of books, and one of the books opened to a page with a photograph of a painting, and her little 2-year-old, who was still in diapers, walked over to this book, looked at the page, and became very animated and started rattling off names. And she went over to see what he was doing, and he was looking at a painting of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and correctly naming the people in the portrait. So she was a little taken aback. And when this child was around 6, they went to Philadelphia for the first time. And when they approached the old part of the city, he started pointing to the various streets and naming them. So once again, she thought, okay, there's something going on here. I don't know what it is. When he was 8, the family went on a tour of the White House, and they came to, I guess, the Red Room, Blue Room, I don't know, I can't remember which. And they were among about 50 people in the tour group. And the tour guide said, well, we have a special treat today. We've refurbished a painting, and then I'll bet no one in this group can identify the location of this painting. So the guide unveiled the painting, and this little 8-year-old stepped forward and said, that's Benjamin Franklin's house on Chestnut Street.
Oh my God.
So the mother turned to the father and said, see, I told you. Which is usually how it goes. You know, mothers are usually more receptive to this, though not always, because it's usually mothers who are on hand to witness these remarks or these unusual behaviors by a child. Anyway, there's more to this story, which I find very interesting. This boy grew up, and at 22 was the youngest magistrate in the United States. And he didn't go to law school, but he seemed to know the law. He understood it. He also had several inventions, which, when his mother asked him if he wanted to copyright any of them, he said, no, I don't think I want to do that. And what's really interesting, too, is he has 2 siblings, and when they were little, they used to speak to each other among themselves in antiquated English. And they would talk about government and politics. And at one point, the mother said, one of the cousins was visiting and heard the 3 children talking among themselves, and went up to her and said, "What are they talking about? You know, I don't understand what they're talking about." She said, "Well, I don't either." But it's interesting because the daughter, there are 2 sons and a daughter. The daughter, last I heard from this mother, the daughter was going to Harvard and studying government. So it's very interesting how these threads carry through, and draw your own conclusions from that one. But the facts are there. And here's another one from my book that I find particularly poignant. Actually, this is from Evanston, Illinois. And if I had thought of it, I would have gotten in touch with this mother, whom I haven't been in touch with since I was writing the first book. And this story particularly touches me because I had my own past life recollections of dying in World War II. And I've had so many synchronistic events, so many confirmations of this in my present life. And I talk a little bit about that experience in my first book. But anyway, on with the story. This mother from Evanston was taking her 3-year-old for extensive dental work. And I don't know exactly what the problem was, but this little girl had silver caps put on her teeth. And the mother said that she had been a very good patient and was very cooperative, and she was riding home in the back in her car seat when, just out of the blue, she said, "Mommy, I don't like having silver teeth, because remember when we were together before and when we died and the bad guys took our silver teeth?" Well, immediately the mother pulled over to the side of the road. She went into a mild state of shock. And she said, being Jewish, she immediately thought of the Holocaust and the way the Nazi soldiers would extract the precious metals from teeth. And her next thought was, well, isn't that nice that we can be together again and have a really good life together? And she said she had never considered reincarnation before, but just the seriousness in which this child spoke of this and the matter-of-fact tone of her voice hit her on a visceral level, so she knew that this was something that happened, and it was true. And she said, well, it probably did happen to me too. And she said in that moment her thoughts about reincarnation completely changed from being not even thinking about it to believing that, yes, this is so. And it's a lot to think about. And it was just this one remark. Sometimes these memories are expressed in just one passing remark, which a lot of us can dismiss as fantasy or imagination, something children have seen on television or heard through conversation. But that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes this is real memory. Another case from the first book that I really like shows how behaviors can be indicative of past life memory too. Not only statements children make, but behaviors. In this case, little boy was about 4 when his preschool took a trip to a small airfield. I think this was in the state of Washington or California. And one of the pilots let the kids go on his little 2-seater airplane. And this little boy got on the plane and he was telling the pilot exactly how to fly the plane. And the pilot was really amazed. And he said to the mother, if I had given this child permission, he probably would have taken off and flown the airplane. He seemed to know exactly what he was talking about. And around the same time, they went to the library, and the mother got a book on airplanes from World War II. And the child went right to the Japanese Zeros, which were, I guess, were the fighter planes, the Japanese fighter planes. And he was really fixated on these. And the mother, who was aware of the possibility of reincarnation, said to him, well, did you ever fly one of these? And he said, yes. And she said, well, if you flew one, what happened to you? And he said, well, I died when I crashed my plane into a ship. And that's precisely what the kamikaze pilots did in Japan in World War II. So at this point, the mother, figured out this child is having past life memories. Around the same age, around 4 or 4.5, the same child lost a button on his pants. And the mother didn't get around to sewing the button back on immediately. And the little boy went into her sewing basket and got a needle and thread and sewed the button on perfectly. And the mother was amazed because this is not something that's easy to do. It's a learned skill, and it takes some precision and some practice to do that well. And she said, where did you learn how to sew? He said, well, I used to sew when I was a sailor. And she said, oh, you were sailing? He said, yes. And he described his life on what sounded like a wooden sailing vessel, and he said, and I would lie in my bed at night and listen to the ship creak. So she thought that was a really interesting detail, and he said that we used to sew our clothes when we were on the ship. So what was really interesting is when this boy grew up, he's now in his 30s, he joined the Navy, and he was stationed in Japan for 4 years, and his mother said he absolutely loved it. So there are these threads that carry through. These are not just random memories. They seem to have some significance for the soul who is remembering, the soul being in the body of the child at the time. So these are examples of the types of stories that I've gotten in the course of my research. And they're fascinating stories, and they not only indicate to me that part of our consciousness does survive death and returns to a new body, but they also offer evidence, not these stories in particular, but what I would describe, that these memories sometimes come up for a reason too, and the reason being that sometimes there's unfinished business from the past which these souls bring with them from a previous life, some issues or unfinished business that needs to be healed. And when children talk about past life memories, sometimes it's an opportunity for them to heal the past so they can live more fully in the present. So with some of these memories, there's real purpose behind them, and there are real opportunities for us as adults to learn about consciousness and what carries over from one lifetime to the next, and be witnesses to this healing in children. And sometimes we can help children in the healing process by acknowledging these memories and by some very simple techniques which I'll describe, which actually I learned from Colleen Hawken, who was here in October, when she told her story of Blake, which I'll briefly tell in a minute. But I got into this research accidentally, inadvertently, I don't know how I'd say it, but I was a mother of 2 young children. I was living in Asheville, North Carolina in the mid-'80s. And at age 5, my son Chase, a little red-headed, very white-skinned, freckle-faced kid, became absolutely hysterical at a 4th of July celebration. This was in his 5th year, which was really odd because we had been at other 4th of July celebrations where there were fireworks, and he had never responded to fireworks before. But on this particular evening, as soon as the fireworks began and they made the big booming sound, Chase became absolutely hysterical. In fact, he cried so hard and for so long, I had to take him home. And I thought, okay, this is very strange. This is out of the ordinary behavior. But children do things like that. And I figured, well, he probably had too much sugar that day or was overstimulated because we had had a big party. So I couldn't get any information from him what had scared him so. But eventually he calmed down. I had to rock him to sleep. And finally he went to bed, and I filed it away thinking, God, I hope that doesn't happen again. Well, a few weeks later, we were at a public indoor swimming pool, and as soon as we walked into the pool building, when someone jumped on the diving board, it made a big booming, reverberating sound. on the walls of the pool building. And as soon as we got in that door, again, Chase became absolutely hysterical and really, literally dragged me out of the building. And we were sitting outside on a chair, and I started thinking, well, it's those sounds. And I said, Chase, it's the sounds that scare you, isn't it? And he said, yes. He cried and he would not go back into the building. So I thought, great, he's ready to start kindergarten in a month or so. You know, what am I going to do if this happens when he's at school? So I really couldn't understand where the fear had come from. There was nothing in his short life that I could attribute this to. And as fate would have it, a hypnotherapist was visiting us from Florida at the time, and he had experience doing past life regression with adults. And that's how he happened to be in my house in Asheville. He was actually conducting a workshop in past life regressions. And I have that story in my first book about how I was cured of asthma through a hypnotic regression. So it completely turned my life around, and I invited Norman Ng, the hypnotherapist, to Asheville to work with some of my friends, including my MD, who was absolutely amazed by the reversal of my symptoms. Anyway, we were sitting around one afternoon with Norman, the hypnotherapist. We were sitting around our kitchen table, and I just mentioned Chase's fear of loud noises, thinking maybe Norman could give him some post-hypnotic suggestion so the next time he was around loud noises, he wouldn't become hysterical, and it wouldn't be awkward for him at school or wherever he was. And Norman listened to what I had to say and what triggered these feelings in Chase, and he said, would you like to try an experiment? And I said, sure. You know, I trusted Norman, and I knew he was an experienced hypnotherapist. I had no idea exactly what he had in mind, but he said to Chase, who was about this big, sit on your mom's lap, close your eyes, and tell me what you see when you hear those sounds that frighten you. And Chase's eyelids started fluttering, and he said, I'm a man, I'm a soldier, I'm crouching behind a rock, I'm scared, I don't know what's going on, I'm confused, there's smoke everywhere. And immediately the hair on my arms stood on end. And I knew this is not Sesame Street, this is not Mr. Rogers, this is nothing he had seen that I knew of. And he said, there's smoke everywhere, I don't know what's going on, I'm shooting, I don't even know what I'm shooting at, I have a gun, a long gun with a sword at the end. And at this point, Norman is well aware that Chase is into a past life memory, having experienced this hundreds of times with adults. And Chase went on to say, I'm hit in my wrist. A bullet hits me or something hits me in my wrist. They take me out of battle. They take me to a hospital, but it doesn't look like a regular hospital. It's just these poles with material on the top. Then they said they put me on a bed, but it's not like a regular bed, it's like a bench. And he said, and they put a bandage around my wrist and they make me go back into battle. I don't want to go. So at this point, Norman says to Chase, well, we live many different lifetimes on Earth, and sometimes we are soldiers, and as soldiers sometimes we have to kill, and sometimes we were killed in battle, but there's no blame. We're just playing these different parts to learn what it is to be human. I was sitting there thinking, I don't know whether Chase is really going to understand this, but I could feel his body relaxing as I held him on my lap. I could see the tension leaving his face. And he said, well, they make me go back. I miss my wife and children. This is getting weirder. And he said, and then they make me go behind a cannon and I pull a string. And all of a sudden his eyes shot open and he just kind of looked around, smiled, hopped off my lap, grabbed a cookie, went off to play with his Legos or whatever. And I said to Norman, what was that? And he said, well, probably past life memory, probably the cause of his phobia of the loud sounds. You know, the sounds of a battlefield. And he said, you'll just have to see over time if his fear goes away. Well, my 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, was sitting at the table with us, taking this all in. In fact, we found out later she was imaging right along with Chase. She could see what he was experiencing. And she said, Mom, that place where Chase said he was shot on his wrist is the place where he has his eczema. And in the excitement of the moment, I completely forgot that Chase had chronic eczema on his wrist since he was a baby. And I had taken him to 3 doctors because of the severity of the eczema. He would scratch that one spot relentlessly to the point where I would have to bandage it at night so he wouldn't wake up with bloody cheeks. And we had tried food elimination diets, homeopathy, salves, ointments for the eczema, and nothing seemed to work. Well, the short version of this is after that day, he was never afraid of loud noises again, and within about 3 days, the eczema cleared up completely, never to return until there's a kind of an end note to the story. It just cleared up. Never thought about it again until about a year ago. Chase turned 19 in October. After his 18th birthday, he came into the house one day, and he was, I said, Chase, what's going on? He said, my eczema's coming back. I said, that's weird. What's going on with you? He said, I just registered for the draft. And after he said that, it went away again. So, this was a 20-minute experience in my kitchen. And I tell the long version of the story in my book. I don't have time to get into it today, but Sarah, who was witnessing all this, had a phobia of fires about our house, specifically about our house catching fire. And Norman did the same thing with her in like a 15-minute session, where she would, just by using that trigger, the what are you seeing, or what are you seeing when you have that fear of fire? And she was immediately back as a child dying in a house fire, and her phobia cleared up too as a result of remembering. So that day was definitely a turning point in my life, because I became absolutely obsessed with finding out more about these memories. I thought, well, if it was that easy for my children to remember, it was so close to the surface, it was actually manifesting as these phobias, then other children must have these memories too. And the fact that both of their phobias cleared up, and the fact that Chase had this chronic physical problem that cleared up, completely blew me away. I don't know any other way to say it. So this was in 1988. And at that time, I was living in this community in Asheville, North Carolina, and I started talking to parents who had children in my children's schools. And I hear little stories, but my child said something once about when they were big. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. I'm not the only one. And I found books about past life regression with adults at that time. Edith Fiore, Helen Wambach. Brian Weiss's book was out, but I didn't even know about it. Many Lives, Many Masters. I started to see that through the work with adults that what my children experienced was not that unusual. Because for about the past 40 or 50 years, there have been therapists in the United States, and actually other parts of the world too, who had stumbled upon past life memories while working with their patients or clients. And they had found the same things by going back and remembering a past life experience, usually a past life death. Patients' phobias cleared up, different types of relationship problems cleared up by going back to past lives and seeing where the origins of problems were. And even physical symptoms cleared up. One of the best books that I found at that time was Roger Wolger's book, Other Lives, Other Selves. He's a Jungian, and I've done a lot of work with Roger, and we have some very synchronistic connections too, through some friends in Asheville. Anyway, I found that what my children experienced was not that unusual, but the fact that they were children doing this was unusual. And I really couldn't find any literature on this. So I started talking to more people, collecting cases, and through the course of my research into adults' past life memories, I found the research of Dr. Ian Stevenson. Do people here know who he is? Anybody? I'm just curious, how many people know of Stevenson? Okay. Well, that's amazing that not everyone knows about his work. But it's not surprising either, because he doesn't do media. He seldom does interviews. But he was formerly the head of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia Medical School, held a very prestigious position there. And in the early 60s started investigating cases of spontaneous past life recall in children in India. And he went to India to investigate some cases that he heard about. And he was amazed when maybe 40 or 50 people came forward with their cases to tell him about their children who remembered specific details of their previous lives. And what's most interesting about these cases in India is that children remember proper names. And in the cases that he ended up investigating, and to date he's investigated almost 3,000 cases, which he has on file at the University of Virginia Medical School, about 100 metal file cabinets. He found that in investigating these cases, the children would remember being a specific person who lived and died before the child was born. And often these people lived in a city or town that was, in Indian terms, far removed from where the child lived. It might have been 30 or 40 kilometers away on rural roads. There was no way that the child could have learned about this other person. And Dr. Stevenson meticulously, thoroughly documented many cases of this kind. For example, I have one in my second book that I love. This case is from Thailand. To give you an example of how detailed these memories can be, this is a case of a 3-year-old in Thailand, whose name was Chennai, I think that's how you pronounce it, who begged his grandmother. He lived with his grandmother. He begged his grandmother to go to this other town. He named the town because he wanted to see his family there. He wanted to see his wife and children. So reincarnation is not a foreign belief in Thailand, but people are not often willing to investigate these cases for 2 reasons: for fear of embarrassing themselves, and for fear that if the child's claims are true, that they really were this other person in a previous life, that the other family might try to adopt them or claim them. So this grandmother was reluctant to do anything about this child's claims until he ran away several times on a bus and went to this other town, and he was like 3 or 4 years old. So finally she gave in to his begging and took him to this town. They got off the bus. This is in rural Thailand. I can't remember how far away the town was, but it was maybe 10 miles or something. When they got off the bus, Chennai led the grandmother to this house. An elderly couple opened the door, and he greeted them as mother and father, and proceeded to tell them that he was really their son, that he'd been a school teacher, and he recalled what his name had been, and how he had been killed on his way to school and someone shot him in the head. And he asked for his twin girls, and he asked where his wife was. So the child said enough accurate things that the elderly couple invited him in. And by the end of the conversation, they said, "Could you come back in a few days?" When they came back, the family was assembled. No one said anything. And this little 4-year-old identified, "You were my wife, you're my twins, you're so-and-so," and he would name nicknames of these people. And they tried various tests, and this might sound familiar to you too. They tested him by showing him some objects. They showed him a necklace with one Buddha amulet on it, and he said, "Where are the other 2 Buddhas?" And they admitted that after this person, his name is Bukai, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, when Bukai died, he had a Buddha necklace with 3 amulets on it, and after he died, they had given 2 amulets to his children. And he said things like, "I want to go up to my closet and get my medical bag, the one I used to take to school." And he knew exactly where it was. Since he was a teacher, apparently he had some medical bag he would take to class. And finally, after knowing all these details, including the fact that he just bought some new blue jeans and where were they, and the wife admitted that she used them for herself, he said, "You always used to do things like that." The family examined this child and found 2 circular birthmarks on his head, which corresponded to the entry and exit wounds of the bullets that had killed Bukai, the man the child remembered being. So at that point, the family was thoroughly convinced that this was their father's son reborn. And Dr. Stevenson has about 1,000 of these cases in which the memories were verified by statements the child made, behaviors the child exhibited like the deceased, and in maybe, I'm not sure what maybe 300 cases, there were birthmarks or birth defects corresponding to fatal wounds, injuries, or disease of the deceased. And in 1997, Stevenson published a 2-volume, 2,200-page set called Reincarnation in Biology, which documents about 221 cases in which he investigated birthmarks and birth defects relating to previous lives. And in about 19 of the cases, there were multiple birthmarks. Well, actually, these are bullet wounds. In 19 cases, there were 2 birthmarks corresponding to entry and exit wounds of bullets that killed someone, as corroborated by medical reports and autopsies of the deceased. So Dr. Stevenson has done incredible research. He's now about 83, and he's leaving us this amazing legacy, which provides physical evidence for reincarnation. He would never say this. I can say this. Proof, if you will, of reincarnation. And not everyone knows about this, and he's an American researcher with a lot of, I don't know, 12 volumes published at this point, something like that. And what I learned from Dr. Stevenson was that children all over the world, regardless of their parents' beliefs, have past life memories up until about the age of 5 or 7. And regardless of the cultural beliefs or the parents' beliefs, children usually forget these memories between about the ages of 5 and 7. This seems to be a universal phenomenon. And these memories come up spontaneously. Children start talking about them sometimes as soon as they can talk. Children can have behaviors that correspond to who Dr. Stevens called the previous personality, to who they were before. And sometimes children can have birthmarks, physical symptoms like my son had, that correspond to wounds or injuries in a previous life. So we have images, mental memories, if you will, mental impressions that seem to carry forward, behaviors that seem to carry forward from previous lives, and even physical symptoms or characteristics that carry over from previous lives. And I guess this is big news in the West, but it's not in India, or Buddhist countries or Hindu countries where they've had this system of philosophy in place for thousands of years. In fact, in India they have beautiful Sanskrit words that describe exactly what carries over from lifetime to lifetime and to what extent the impressions from previous lives carry forward into the present life. But as far as I was concerned, this was new news to me when I started investigating. I think new news to a lot of us in the West that children can have these memories. So Dr. Stevenson's work was the foundation or the jumping off point for me, and it's really what convinced me that there was some substance to what had happened with my children more than what I observed alone. And it wasn't until I met Colleen Hawken, who is from Milwaukee. She lives very close. She was here at the October meeting. When she called me about her son Blake, that I saw the potential for other children to heal emotional and physical carryovers from previous lives, and how parents could actually help their own children with this. And very briefly, Colleen had a 3-year-old, Blake, who one day, just out of the blue, was standing in the hall yelling to his older brother, "Get out of the road, you're going to get hit by the truck." And Colleen told the story better than I can. But basically, she went in to see what was going on, and Blake started talking about he had been hit by a truck. And Colleen assumed he was talking about a tow truck. No, he was talking about a big truck on the street that hit him. And Colleen just so happened to have seen Brian Weiss on Oprah the day before, who just merely mentioned, that sometimes children have past life memories, but in our culture we dismiss these memories as fantasy. And fortunately, Colleen was primed and ready for this, so that when Blake said that, she questioned him, "Well, what happened when you were hit by the truck?" And he said, "Well, I went under the wheels," and he went like this, and he said, "I was under the wheels and the truck hit me, and then he died." So Colleen really didn't know what to do with this information, and she was hoping that he would forget it. But a week later, she said a garbage truck went by, and Blake said, "That's just like the truck that hit me." Again, she said, "Oh, okay. Not knowing what to do with it, she thought, okay, this is just something that kids say. Maybe it's a past life memory, maybe it's not. But after Blake said this, Colleen noticed that over the next 6 months or so, Blake's personality started changing. He became a little morose, kind of depressed. He was not interested in his normal play activities, and sometimes he would just sit on the couch and stare out into space. And he started complaining about aches and pains on the left side of his body. And when Colleen would try to comfort him or question him, he would say, "I love you, but I hate you, go away." And she couldn't seem to get through to him. And she tried things like, draw your ouches, draw your aches and pains. And he said, "No, I don't want to." And he would complain about hurting. So they were, I guess about 4 months into this, they were visiting London, and Blake was in a little stroller, and they were carrying the other children. And they were at Piccadilly Circus, which is a very busy intersection, and Blake jumped out of the stroller into the path of an oncoming truck. Fortunately, the truck driver slammed on his brakes, and Colleen's husband pulled Blake off by the scruff of his neck. And at that moment, she thought, "Oh my God, maybe there is something to what he's saying about being hit by a truck, and maybe on some level, Blake is trying to reenact this." And she got very concerned. And when she got home, she noticed a reader ad I put in Mothering Magazine asking for any parents who might have cases of children remembering previous lives. And she called me. This was before the internet. And she told me what was going on with Blake. And I was completely winging it. I really didn't know what to tell her. But I listened to her. I said, "Yeah, it's possible this is past life memory." And I told her a little bit what happened with my kids and with my daughter, who remembered dying in a house fire, and how my daughter had said that she carried that memory with her as anger because she thought that her parents had not saved her from that fire. When she went back and remembered, she had seen that they actually had tried to save her, which seemed to resolve this issue for her. So I was telling Colleen this, and knowing that I really couldn't refer her to a psychologist or a psychiatrist in the Chicago area who would take her seriously, or Blake. And I said, "Well, look, just try this." I said, when children have these memories, when they're 2 and 3, these memories are as real to them as something that happened last month. And sometimes they confuse past and present because they're on this continuum of consciousness. As all of you know very well, consciousness does continue from life through death, through rebirth, and the Tibetans have been saying this for thousands of years. And as a 2 or 3-year-old, you're still in this continuum where you remember your previous lives, but a 2-year-old doesn't know that this is something that happened before in another body. And I said, wait until a time when Blake is relaxed, like at bedtime. And first of all, you have to acknowledge to him that yes, he did die. I said, yeah, this is going to be hard for you. but acknowledge that he did get hit by the truck, and then reassure him that he's now back in a new body and he is safe. And as I said, I was completely winging this and hoping that it would work because I really didn't know what else to tell her. So a week later, Colleen called and she said, "Oh, I can't believe this. I just have to tell you that I did what you said. I waited until bedtime and I said to Blake, 'You were hit by a truck, weren't you?' And she said, for the first time in 6 months, his eyes really lit up and he said, yes. And she said, well, you know, that was a different mommy then. You know, you had a different body then. And she said she could just feel this weight lifting off the child. And she said, you know, you're now back in a new body. I'm a new mommy. And she named everyone in this lifetime, all his brothers and cousins and everything, to ground him in this reality. And she said it was like magic. He was back to his old happy self. He never again complained about an ache and pain on the left side of his body. And she said, I just can't believe this. This is so amazing. I'm going to write to Oprah. This is in 94 or 93, maybe 93. I said, yeah, great. Wait till I write a book, okay? Well, Colleen went ahead and wrote the letter. And as it turned out, they filed the letter, called me a year later after I'd written a couple of articles, and within a week I found myself back here in Chicago with Mary on Oprah with Colleen and my kids, and we told our stories. A whole hour on Oprah with no book to sell. Thank you. And so it goes. So anyway, that actually Oprah, because of the response I got from Oprah, who just said, you know, this is going to help a lot of children, that gave me the impetus to go ahead and write the first book with the material that I had at the time. And now that came out in 97, and so how many years is that? 6? 5? Whatever. I've gotten hundreds of cases confirming what I stated in the first book, that how these memories express themselves in children, how children are very matter-of-fact when they talk about this, how sometimes they need help grounding in the present reality. Sometimes they need that extra little encouragement. Yes, this really did happen, but you're now in a new life. And the cases started rolling in. I mean, they're still rolling in through email. And you know, after getting so many cases confirming what I thought was true about these memories and how they could help heal children too, I had many emails confirming this. I got a case from the Lukes, a family that lived about an hour from here, another Chicago case. And this really changed the way I looked at reincarnation and past lives. And who was here in October at that meeting when Billy Luke told the story? Well, I could never follow that act, but I'll try very briefly. Billy was here telling his story. His wife, Kathy, had been a very young mother who had a little boy who was diagnosed with neuroblastoma at age 17 months. And he ended up dying at 2 years, 2 months, I believe. And his name was James. And at the time of James's death, he had a large tumor behind his left eye, which caused blindness in that eye. They inserted an IV on the right side of his neck, which left a scar. He had about 17 tumors in his left leg. They had biopsied a large tumor behind his right ear, and you know, the poor child was a mess. And Kathy nursed him through the illness without much help. She was estranged from her family for most of that time, and then they came together at the end. Kathy eventually moved away from where she was living and met this wonderful man, Billy Luke, whom you met at the October meeting, who told his story. And they married and had a daughter, a son, and then in 1992, Kathy was pregnant for the 4th time. And she gave birth to a son by C-section. And I guess as she was coming out of anesthesia, some doctors came into her room and said, "Has your husband told you yet?" And immediately Kathy thought, "Oh my God, this child didn't make it, having had a child who died." And they said, "Well, it appears he's blind in his left eye because it's completely opaque." And she said, any normal mother would have been terribly upset by this news, but she was just glad that Chad, the new son, was alive. And she said when they handed Chad to her, she immediately noticed that he had what looked like a vertical linear scar on the right side of his neck and what looked like a tumor above his ear, about an inch above his right ear, where James had had the tumor biopsy. And she asked the doctors, "What is this?" And they said, "It's just a functional cyst. It should go away." And she said, at the time of James's death, the opaque eye, the facial distortion on the left side of his face caused by a tumor, the big tumor behind his right ear, and the surgical scar were what you noticed most when you looked at that baby. And she said, here they were again. And she said, the moment she held Chad, she felt this familiarity. And she was born Midwest Baptist, never thought about reincarnation, but she said she just knew in holding this child that somehow James was back. She tried to tell the father of James, not Billy, but James's father, what she thought. And he said, "You've lost your mind, you're crazy." So she didn't share that with anyone, but she said her side of the family noticed similarities between Chad and James, and they were afraid to say anything for fear of upsetting her. And she kind of lived with this and wondered about it. And then at age 4, Chad started saying things. Out of the blue, he said to her, "Mama, I want to go back to our other house." And Kathy said, "What other house?" And he said, "The one with the orange and brown brick."
Oh boy.
Yeah, you got it, you guessed it. And she said that they had lived in, when James was alive, she and James had lived in an apartment with this kind of, I guess, faux brick, orange and brown stuff. And she asked, "Why do you want to go back?" And he said, "Because I left you there." So at this point, she knows, well, he knows. I know he knows. What do I do with this? And then he started asking for specific toys that had belonged to James, which the present family didn't have. And she was getting increasingly upset with each utterance from Chad. She really didn't know what to do with this. I guess the climax was when he went up to his 10-year-old brother. He was 4 at the time, and said to his brother, I was here before and got very sick and died, but now I'm back, which sent the older one running and screaming from the room. So what's a mother to do? So Kathy went into her local bookstore and she found Children's Past Lives, and she had a friend, she wasn't even online, she had a friend email me with the bear outline in the story, and I'm going, whoa, this is fantastic, please have your friend get in touch with me. And I knew that Ian Stevenson would be interested in this case too because of the physical correspondence. So Kathy and I started a year's correspondence back and forth on the phone. I said, look, finally what happened was Kathy had not fully grieved for James. She was very young at the time, and James's last words to his mother were, "Mama, don't cry for me." And she honored that, and we all know that is very unhealthy. You cannot stop the grieving process. So she needed to do some processing, and apparently Chad did too. So I tell the story in full in the second book, Return from Heaven. And Billy told the story to you. I think there's been a lot of healing in that family through this process by acknowledging the reality of what has happened. And Kathy said that she had prayed in some way for her son to come back, but she never thought she'd get it quite this way. And the saga goes on as Billy told those who were here, James has many psychic abilities. He time travels, he sees spirits, he has these past life memories of other lives too. It goes on and on and on. You know, I can count on like once a month hearing from Kathy with something new, which is really totally outside of my realm. But they have Diane here now. And, I was hoping that Billy or Kathy would come today, but it's okay.
He had a near-death experience at his birth as well. Because
Possibly, yeah.
because his heart stopped beating and they had to do a cesarean to get him out. And so he died at that time. Most children lose their memories of these things, but when you have a near-death experience, that expands the psychic connection and ability to remember, I think.
Well, Chad Luke has it all.
He does.
He's had all of it, plus very vivid past life memories. And anyway, that story touched me so deeply. I actually did share it with Ian Stevenson, and we came. He and his research colleague Jim Tucker, who is a psychiatrist in Charlottesville, who's now Ian is retiring, and Jim Tucker is taking over continuing his research at UVA. Jim and Dr. Stevenson came out and met the Lukes and looked at medical records and wrote an article which was rejected by the Lancet, big surprise. And I came out with him a second time. They usually follow up at least several times on these cases, and I had the privilege of coming out and investigating 2 cases in the Chicago area with Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson. And I got to see Chad, I got to see his scar, and you know, all these things I'd been reading about in Stevenson's work for years, so it was pretty amazing. But the intensity of that experience for the Lukes, and for me, the profound healing and the miracle that losing a child, you know, which is one of the worst things we can experience. Granted, we know that it's not the end of life, but it certainly is a tragedy to endure. That a child lost to death, or any family member for that matter, can return to the same family within a relatively short period of time. And once I opened up to the mystery, the magic of the Luke story, I started getting more and more and more. I said, okay, I get it. Now, you know, I have to write a second book. And my second book is about same family cases in which these are people, for the most part, who have absolutely no belief in reincarnation until a child was born in the family who had very idiosyncratic behaviors, just like Grandpa. Remember incidents from Grandpa's life that no one ever talked about, who had paralysis or some kind of neurological problem which caused a limp on the left side of his body, and Grandpa had suffered a stroke on the left side of his body before he died. You know, it goes on and on and on, that all of the things that we see in past life memories in children revealed that somehow the consciousness of this relative is back in a new body, in a new child, in the same family, and this can be a very fast turnaround. So I'm going to leave it at that, just to give you a hint of what's in that second book, because the stories are very rich, and I think what these stories have to say to me is that, you know, you think that in the interlife, a lot is mitigated or a lot is healed. Maybe yes, maybe no, because what we're seeing in some of these cases is that when you see this person back again, sometimes they're picking up where they left off in relationship. And that is the reason why we come back too. It's a continuous journey. And it's really interesting when we look at these cases carefully, the cases in the same family, to see how the quality of the relationship, the tenor of a relationship persists through death into the new life. In other words, you had a fabulous relationship with your brother, for example, you were very close with your brother and he died tragically in an auto accident, he could come back as your child and you can have that same incredible bond again. If you had a contentious relationship with your mother, that entity, that soul can come back as your child and you can, you can have a little trouble. And, but it can be worked through, you know, having this knowledge, yeah, well, this child is really obstinate and stubborn and doesn't listen to the thing I say. Maybe there's a reason. You know, it gives you a little different perspective. Maybe it's not your parenting skills, but maybe it is something innate in this child that has to do with a prior reincarnation. It's a very different way of looking at relationship. But that's what I'm finding through the cases that I'm getting, that there are a lot of things that carry forward through death. And I guess with this group that's significant because, you know, there is this consciousness that does not die at death. And it sometimes seeks another embodiment, and we can see this, we can witness this through the children's memories. And I think, hopefully, over the next 10, 20 years, this will be, I'm optimistic, kind of a mainstream concept here in the West, and will acknowledge these memories in children and help them heal issues from the past. And not only is it good for them, it's good for us because it really opens up our consciousness to the eternal nature of the soul. And that sounds like a good place to put the period and open it up to questions. Yes?
In the Eastern religions, when we hear about reincarnation, sometimes it changes species. That if you don't live a good life, you may come back as another animal. I think I've heard that distinguished as transmigration rather than reincarnation. In all of the cases that you heard of, have children ever had memories of being out of species?
I've heard this
Could you
from
repeat the
parents.
question, please?
In some cultures, they believe that you don't have to come back as a human being, you can come back as an animal. I have heard, parents have asked me, you know, my child claims to have been a squirrel in its past life. Well, that might be true, but I don't really deal with those cases because there's nothing, as far as I'm concerned, there's no substance. Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough trying.
What did the house look like when you were a squirrel?
Yeah, it's hard enough. Right. It's hard enough putting forth this with more substantial evidence than.
So it doesn't come up very often.
No. I don't give it much credence, but who knows? Maybe we come back as rocks. Maybe we can come back in any form at all. Maybe we come back in different planes of existence to different planets. In fact, I think we do. But that's kind of hard to substantiate.
Thank you.
Yeah, but who knows? Yellow shirt.
What would you say the primary value or implication of your work is for how we live experiences while we're in body?
Repeat the question. The tape.
From my experience, what do I think is the lesson for us from these children's memories?
Or the value of
the value?
Having experiences in an embodied form. Because we were talking about that earlier in terms of learning.
It seems that I don't know, I mean, it gets into big philosophical questions, and my take on it is that okay, let me give you a metaphor, which I love. This comes from Judaism, from, I think, the Kabbalah. I can't even remember the source. But I have Rabbi Omer Mann, who was meeting with the Dalai Lama, used this as a metaphor to describe the Jewish belief in reincarnation. And he said that the ultimate goal of Gilgul, which is how the Kabbalah describes reincarnation, the cycles of existence, is to weave a garment of light. And in some incarnations, we weave more threads into the garment. In other incarnations, we unravel threads. But the ultimate goal is to have this garment of light. And that was the best metaphor I've seen or heard that describes this process. I think it's a journey to at-one-ment. And I think it can only be done through the body. maybe, well, the Buddhists, they have the, what is it, the great vertical path or something where you can have instant enlightenment. But I think that there is a choice to come back in body to keep going to reach that state of maybe it's balance, harmony, love, light, just to up the ante a little bit, or up the, what would the word be, vibration, or, yeah, I mean, I guess that's what it is. And, you can find any philosophical system. I think all the major religions are in agreement with, we have to learn to love and be compassionate. What is, to be a being of love is certainly a certain vibrational level, and I think at some point we can decide to come back or not come back. And in Buddhism, they have the bodhisattvas who willingly come back to help others achieve enlightenment. So, I don't know. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Yes?
My question is, there's this idea of the indigo children, the children being born now in greater numbers with greater consciousness of these experiences. What's your take on that? And then something you alluded to earlier was you would give us some techniques. Were there anything other than what you said about acknowledging the reality of what these children have gone through? Were there any other additional things that you wanted to give us that we could use to help these children?
Well, I think acknowledgement is the key for any of these paranormal experiences, which allows them to open, and it actually opens us too, because they are here to teach us. I think that the beings who are coming in now some of them are a lot more aware than we are. Maybe they're at a higher vibrational frequency. I've read all the New Age stuff and indigo stuff. I mean, I think there is something to it, because it seems that there are more and more children who are having these experiences, and maybe it's the whole collective consciousness is changing. As Joseph Campbell would say, we're creating a new myth, a global myth, or maybe the Star Wars myth, or the universal consciousness myth. Something's definitely happening. And you would think that these beings who may have been off on different planes of existence, maybe on other planets, I don't know, are coming in now because things are reaching some critical state, I would think, globally. That's kind of hard to deny, that things
You're right.
Things are, yeah, I mean, you might have a different take on it, especially those who've had near-death experiences might have a bigger global perception of what's going on, but I think that they're reflecting this consciousness for whatever reason, and I think it's really important for us to allow them to express themselves fully so they can manifest their potential. I think that's true of any age of any children, but look how things have changed even in 30 years from, I was raised in the 50s, pretty solid matter. It took the 60s for us to really start breaking through. So acknowledgement, I think, would be, just allowing that awareness to come in through the children would be the single most important technique. Yes, Ted.
Carol, I've got a toughie for you. This has to do with children as well as adults.
Mm-hmm.
You hear so many stories about either children or adults dying and coming back and said, I was with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
How do I know it was Jesus? Does he have a name tag? Who knows what he looks like?
That's a good question, and I've had a lot of those, and I don't know the answer to that, but some children will say, I was with God, I was with angels, and in fact, one case I have in the second book, the families from Minnesota, and they said that, no church, they never took the child to church,
Right.
And she would always talk about being with Jesus, and she wanted a Bible when she was like 2 years old. And actually, Stevenson found a precedent for this too. He found that children, some children came in with, what did he call it, precocious piety. Where they were really drawn to ritual and certain religious practices without, the parents may not be into this at all. he has some published cases. I know from Thailand, there was one that was on a BBC presentation that he did, the only one that I ever saw, I think maybe the only TV he ever did, of this child who remembered being a Buddhist monk. And at age 2, he was doing all the rituals and he wanted to go to the shrines, and the parents finally gave in and they took him to this monastery and they recognized him as being the head. I don't, whether it was a lama or another term, I can't remember. But they welcomed him back and he went to live at the monastery. And this happens with the Tulkus, who were born, the high Tibetan lamas who were reborn in the West. There have been a few of them who have vivid memories of Tibet. And some spoke Tibetan dialect and were recognized. And there was one case on the A&E documentary somebody mentioned, Beyond Death, that featured one of these Tulkus who was born in Canada, and he ended up going back to Dharamsala and was training to be a Buddhist monk, and decided he wanted to live a secular life and moved to Paris and got married. But he had very vivid memories of Tibet. He would describe the landscape to his parents. And he spoke, I think they were they had someone, a Tibetan, visiting them, and the child went up to him and sat on his lap and started speaking in Tibetan dialect, which is not unlike the stories you hear of how they, like the Dalai Lama, how they present different tests and show them different objects, and that's how they determine if it's really...
That's right.
Yeah, so I mean, this happens all the time in the West too, where a child will say, look at Grandpa's Rolex and say, that's my watch, I want it back. So anyway, I kind of veered off a little, but I don't know. But they seem to know. They seem to have memories of Jesus or God or angels, and they'll call them by that name.
Because if everybody sees Jesus, think of the millions of Christians that die every day. The poor guy'd be on overload, trying to be with everybody.
Yeah, but I think, I don't want to talk about...
Yeah,
Experiencers experience something very similar. When you're out of body, you know who you're dealing with. You just know. It's a different
It could be.
I've also heard from...
way to know.
Yeah, some Jewish parents who said that their child referred to the being by some Hebrew name I can't even remember, and I thought, well, did they ever hear that? No. It was just something, many different manifestations. I don't even think, I don't know. It can
just
be,
know.
You just know. You can
It's
call
Mickey
it God.
Mouse.
Huh?
It's Mickey Mouse.
Mickey.
He's disguising himself as Jesus.
I know. Yes.
I have a story that can benefit and empower any parent dealing with a child and connecting.
You want to?
It's, I was in the Sulzer Regional Library.
You want to come up here so Ted can get you on tape?
I was in the Sulzer Regional Library, and I was talking in the video checkout line. I was talking to someone about spiritual ideas, and at a break in the conversation, a woman came up to me and said, "May I speak to you?" She explained that her 6-month-old son had been born at Children's Memorial Hospital, and the doctors there diagnosed that that child had been born with a liver and kidney condition. The bile ducts on the kidney were blocked. They said that the child, if it didn't have a liver transplant by the time it was 1 year old, it would die. I explained to her that we think about 50 to 60,000 thoughts every day, but the most powerful thoughts we think are just before entering sleep. The subconscious takes those thoughts when we're lying drowsily awake and our body is sinking down into the mattress. The subconscious takes those thoughts into sleep, works all night long on creating them the next day, the next week, the next month in our experience. If you're thinking about your problem with fear, worry, anxiety, the subconscious will take that problem into sleep, work all night long on expanding it, increasing it, intensifying it. But if you're thinking about the solution to the problem and knowing your higher self can solve it and giving it over to your higher self, then the subconscious will take that into sleep or your higher self, and work all night long on solving it. I explained to her that, I said, you could imagine yourself in your doctor's office, bringing the future into the present moment. Just the same thing that Jesus said, when you pray for something, believe you've already received it and you shall have it. I said, feel yourself when you're lying drowsily awake and sinking down into the mattress, sitting in the doctor's office. She nodded, she could imagine that. And I said, you could imagine the doctor standing, your child's doctor standing in front of you, holding up an x-ray, saying over and over again, it's a miracle, it's a miracle, embodying the idea that your son is healed and cured and free of the condition. And I said, do this every night and then maintain the idea during the day that your son is healed and cured and free of the condition. I forgot all about the conversation. 6 to 8 weeks later, this woman called me and she said, Mr. Galrad, just the way you said it, that's just the way it happened. And then I said, would you write me a testimonial on that? And 4 to 6 weeks later, in the mail, 2 1/4 pages that she had single-spaced on her computer, telling about how it had changed her life and her faith and her view of things, and how many prayer groups were praying for her son. And then she didn't sign that, but she signed on the back in very small print on the back of a business letter that she had printed on how many things she didn't include after she completed the computer letter. But the second thing I had told her was that she could go in while her son was sleeping every night and repeat his name 3 times, and then tell that child that the presence of God was all around that child and within the child, restoring, renewing, and healing the liver and the kidneys. And also I said, tell your son that mother and dad love him very much, and that he's wanted and needed in the family, and that sisters and brothers love him very much. And I said, do this every night, and you'll see that it really works. And for any child, when a child is asleep, if you go in and mention the child's name 3 times, and then tell that child, I know one hypnotist who did it with his children all the way through grade school and high school. They got all A's. They kept their room neat. And they, miracle. In harmony, they blended in with the family beautifully. So it's something that we can all do for any child. And we can work miracles.
Class, Jill?
Yeah, go.
I just wanted to ask you a question. Well, the question I want to ask you, Carol, is I thought it was the thing I liked the most about your work was you took it beyond sort of, I feel like a lot of the researchers, it's just a whole curiosity thing, and, oh, we're going to prove reincarnation, and I like how you stepped past that to why is this coming up and how can we help these children? And I guess part of what I found really interesting was how did you take, it seemed like you took the ideas from counseling and then transferred it over to helping these children heal the traumatic experiences. And how do you work differently with a child and an adult? How did that all come about?
Thanks, Mary. Actually, it wasn't like I thought this through. It was more like, after my experiences with my own children, they showed me.
Okay.
So, they showed me that it can be done with children, and learning that these memories usually come up spontaneously with children, showed me that it's kind of a natural process. So I just extrapolated what I learned from adult regression therapy to use for parents to use with their own children with the spontaneous memories. And it seems that in some cases the difference is when the memories are coming up spontaneously in young children, they are going as far as they want to go. You use open-ended questions and try to keep the information coming, but they'll go as far as they want to go. When I work with an adult, it's very different. First, there has to be more stirring of the unconscious to get to the memory, and there's a lot more processing that needs to be done, because if you have, say that you come in with a karmic issue, you know, some unfinished business from the past, when you're a 2-year-old, it hasn't been layered over repeatedly. So it can be a much simpler process. It can be processed, worked through. With adults, usually we keep going around. I think Roger Wolger described it as, you know, remember record players getting stuck in the same, the needle gets stuck in the same groove, and, you know, the complex becomes deeper, however you want to put it. So it does take sometimes more work to get to the core and rework the energy, rework the patterning. It depends. It depends upon the individual. So it is a slightly different process. That's why I think it's so important, if these memories are coming up spontaneously, the soul has a natural impetus or impulse to want to heal. So I think we have to go with that. And if we're just witness to it, and, you know, yes, that did happen, but that was in another life. Yes, it's okay, you know, that baby you lost. And Billy Luke told the most amazing story about his daughter, too, who was obsessed with babies. And she would carry around a backpack. I don't know, I'm digressing, but actually this is instructive. Chad Luke's sister was obsessed with babies, and Billy said everywhere they went, she would look at every baby in the shopping cart, or anytime she heard a baby on a television ad or something, she would look. And she carried around backpacks filled with cans of food, I think it was. And once the Lukes started catching on, I think Billy said something to her. She said something about, maybe I have to find my baby. Do you remember what it was? I have to find my baby. And Billy said, well, what happened? She said, well, I was driving, I left my baby with my mother, and I was driving to the grocery store. I had an accident and died. On the way back, I have to find my baby. And Billy told her, it's okay, your mother took care of your baby, and now she's probably a grown woman. She's okay now, and that was it. But Billy said, this went on for a couple of years, where she was absolutely obsessed. And I think, what?
Always dragging food with her.
Yeah.
She had to take food with her, just as a little tiny toddler.
Yeah, so once they realized, you know, he realized that this is past life material, it was resolved. Oh, okay, my baby's taken care of. I think if it hadn't been, it may have gone away eventually, or it might have constellated another way when Jessica grew up into, I don't know, separation anxiety with her own children, or, you know, some kind of phobia. You know, some way it probably would have developed into something. Although, you know, maybe not. But it was easily, once they figured out what was going on, just by asking her, and she was old enough to express herself, it's okay, the baby's taken care of, I don't have to worry about the baby anymore, because from day one, this child responded to any baby's cry. Yeah, that was almost as amazing as Chad's story. Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
It brought tears to the eyes to hear him tell us.
Oh, it was so incredible.
So touching.
So, and I think that, I mean, I see in my son, who actually, as it turned out, Chase had more memories about this lifetime. It turned out it was the American Civil War, and he remembered being a black soldier, which is really hilarious because Chase couldn't be any whiter. You know, we change. I mean, you know, we change from lifetime to lifetime, but I just thought it was an interesting touch that he is so white. And, you know, he remembers being black, and he really gravitates towards black culture now. And, you know, this is who he is. He's a drummer. He has an African-American girlfriend. You know, and this is who Chase is, and that's part of him. And, you know, I understand this. You know, this is where it comes from. You know, It's
Oprah
natural.
like that too, I recall.
Yeah, Oprah said,
She called him a buffalo soldier. She kept calling him that.
yeah, she said, okay, Chase, you know, she, the camera on red-haired Chase. She's looking at him saying, okay, you being the Opie Taylor of this generation, you know, do you have some attraction to black people? And he said, no, I don't think so. But, you know, he neglected to say that, you know, his two best friends were black and, you know, whatever. But, so, I mean, these things do, because they are part of us. We are a composite of what we've been in the past. And I think with the difficult issues, if they can be resolved that easily in early childhood, why not do it rather than leaving these issues to grow and grow? And maybe some of them do have to grow. Maybe that's part of our destiny to work these things out over time. And then, you know, when you're adults, you go to therapy. And if you're lucky, you get someone who has an awareness of past lives if you're hitting a wall, you know, with the same things over and over again. So, I hope that answered.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
That made me think, what about change in gender?
Oh, it happens.
Is that common or uncommon? Or?
It's common. And I think, actually, Stevenson wrote an article about transgender identity confusion. I think some children are surprised to find themselves in another sexed body. I have a case in the second book where this little girl remembered. Oh, she was not interested in girls' toys. She wanted to dress like a boy. She cut her hair short. She wanted only boys' toys. And when she was about, I think, 4, she announced to her father, oh, I was supposed to go to your parents and be their little boy, but then I decided I didn't want to or something, and then I became their little girl. Well, the father found out that his mother had had a stillborn boy child. And once she said this, she started growing her hair. In Philadelphia, someone I didn't know really well lost an 11-year-old girl in a car accident. Mother was driving, skidded on icy roads. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And after Sarah Jane died, she was in a coma for 10 days. And after she died, she came to me in physical form. I saw her, and this is the only time this has really happened to me. And she said, you have to tell my parents that it was my choice, that I knew I was going to die when I did, and it would have accelerated my growth by lifetimes to come in and leave as a child, although I knew it would be so difficult for my parents. It was something I had to do, and I wish my parents knew that. So I called a mutual friend who was this child's godmother, and I said, Becky, you know, you wouldn't believe what just happened. And I said, do you think I should tell David and Ginny? And she said, oh, no, that's much too weird. Well, 6 weeks later, I got a call from David. I didn't even know him that well. You know, it was like, I'd see him at birthday parties and we'd chat, but, you know, he would never have called me. And he said, someone told me you were doing past life regression. I was wondering if you could do a session with me. I said, oh, okay. And he flew me down to Asheville, and I knew it was Sarah Jane orchestrating this thing. And when I got there, I worked with him. I mean, it got very interesting, but the mother, Ginny, revealed to me, and this is so cool, she said, I told them about the vision and what Sarah Jane told me. And, you know, it's really difficult to say, but I mean, there I was sitting in their living room. Obviously, I was there for a reason. And they said that after Sarah Jane died, they had a home office, and they had a copy machine in it. And you know how copy paper comes in reams that are wrapped in paper and sealed? They opened up a fresh ream of copy paper, and on a page of blank paper in Sarah's handwriting was, I love you. So she would, yeah. So she was orchestrating that because it was a real roundabout way that David found out I was doing past life regression, and, you know, flew me down there. So that, I mean, I knew that vision was real, and I knew I had to tell them what I had to tell them.
What was their response?
They cried. But I think it was, you know, wow, you know, and then they told the story about the copy paper, which they were afraid to tell anyone because they didn't think anyone would believe it. But, you know, there's so much that goes on. I think my feeling is when you feel this time is right, you just feel it out and see where she is in her process. You know, sometimes people are very open, because I know after Sarah Jane died, her parents completely opened up, and David went to Buddhist monks and, you know, just looked everywhere to try to find some meaning in this. So it can be a very fertile time for being open to new ideas and new consciousness, a new way of seeing life and death. And then there are also, you know, you can recommend books on after-death communication too. I think I've worked as a bereavement counselor. In fact, I'm probably going back to do that part-time. And I think it's so helpful for people to know about after-death communication and all of it. Because without a belief in some form of an afterlife, how can you deal with death? And I can't even comprehend how you would go through a death of a child without some belief that some part of this child's consciousness lives on and is somehow still connected. So, one more, and I think it's time to wrap it.
You dropped the subject of animals, but I have one. Over in the park off Central Street, there's a dog who comes from way down in East Evanston. And this dog, if he sees a child in a cart, in a stroller, he goes after the stroller, he sticks his face in to look at the child. He pays no attention to other animals, he pays no attention to other people, but he likes babies in strollers. Isn't that unusual?
Well, I wish we could regress that dog. See what that's all about.
Well, there are animal communicators.
Yeah, there are. There's some really good ones, too.
Yeah, I've gotten some interesting past life information from my dogs through communicators.
Yeah.
And one told the communicator that we had been in a circus together, and that she started laughing. She said, you know, your dog is telling on you, because the communicator said that we got kicked out of the circus because of my drinking in that lifetime. And then we lived down the street, and she was my companion, and she was my comfort. And she's a little scavenger. I mean, every time we take a walk, it's not about doing her business. It's about what can she find. And I mean, she's well fed in my house. There was, and she had been on top of elephants doing the tricks that she did in the circus. And this little dog was 17 pounds and could jump on top of everything and had great balance. She was always walking on top of the sofa and stuff like a cat. And, you know, it all sort of fit.
That's great.
And as a child, as 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, when I went to the circus, I hated the circus. And I told my parents it was because the lifestyle that the people had to live was so insecure.
That sounds like a direct hit. Well, I mean, I do believe that animals can reincarnate too, and I have a lot of emails about my pet who died, came back, and I said, well, that's not my field, but thank you very much. But, yeah, definitely.
I'm sure I've been with my dogs before, but I think they've been dogs and I've been a human.
Well, thanks very much. It was great to be back in Chicago, and I appreciate Diane's efforts. I want to thank the little lady behind the curtain. Back there, Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We're so delighted to have you here today. It's been wonderful. As we usually do after these meetings, we will be continuing over at Ruby's on Skokie Boulevard dinner if anybody wants to come along. And that is often an extension of our meeting, and it's also fun. So you're all welcome. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you next month. Don't forget to get the word out about Melvin Morris. Less than that. It's very close. It's, you know, it's Skokie Boulevard.